This week's Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff's Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com.
Welcome to another episode of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking today with my friend Kristi Swartz, who I have not talked to in far too long. And Kristi has a new role at a media outlet called Floodlight. And we're going to talk about what Floodlight is and what Kristi's been up to. And then we're going to find out what the coolest thing about Kristi is that you might not know. So I'm giving you the heads up, Kristi. You got to think about what is the coolest thing about Kristi that people may not know. So we're going to people like, oh man, that's cool. I didn't know Kristi did that. Now she's like thinking, oh crap, what's the cool thing about me?
Okay,
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi.
Let's start out by let's give a little background about your journalist background here in Atlanta.
Sure.
And you can introduce your editor too at some point when you want. Who is I love when the editors walk across the desk there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. So my editor here, this is Snoopy.
Snoopy. Oh, hey Snoopy.
Right into the camera. Okay, buddy. So now I'm gonna talk and I'm gonna put you on the floor, okay? I am a huge Nuts fan. So we got that out of the way. All right.
There you go. All right. So what's your journalism background? And I'm trying to think where I first met you. AJC maybe?
Yes, at the AJC. So I had just moved up there from South Florida working at the Palm Beach Post. And a lot of people really connect me with Florida. And I mean, it's true. I still have a ton of connections there. My parents started spending the winter there and my mom still does now. But I actually hail from Maryland and have a degree from the University of Maryland from their journalism school. And I'm not going to walk everybody through step by step because that just gets boring. But I'm also very proud of that. And I'm proud of how the school has evolved so much with, I guess, the times and the way that the industry is and things like that. So graduated from there, left Maryland, which was, the only place I had lived and where I grew up, and then spent a little bit of time in North Carolina. My internships were mostly in business, which was kind of odd because everyone likes to go to the whole, journalists don't like math. And there's math, but there's also accounting and reading balance sheets and looking at regulatory things, which I say all of that is an art and a science. As I explained to my new coworkers, I talked to them a little bit about how electric utilities work. I said, look, I know this because I've been doing this for a long time. When I was 25, listening to an earnings call, I mean, I about broke out in hives. Now it's like, now it's old hat. But I took a lot of summer internships at papers working on business stories because I looked ahead and I thought, well, getting out of school, everyone's going to want some metro job. And so how do I make myself more marketable? So my last internship was at the AJC when it was huge and covered 3 or 4 floors on 72 Marietta Street. And the business desk took up half the room. And I learned a lot while I was there. And then, like I said, worked at a couple of places in North Carolina and went down to Florida. Hit there at a good time. There was administration change where the incoming governor was looking at a lot of things related to climate. We had back-to-back hurricanes, and I got to learn a lot about how utilities operate and about the regulatory process and about how to follow the money because where there's business, there's politics, as we know. So you're on mute.
I know. You think I would have learned not to do that mute thing by now? I coughed. So I hit mute there for a second. Yeah, I was gonna say you think people would figure out like the strange flow of business and money and politics, right?
It took me a while, and then once that clicked, I mean, again, as I was explaining to my new coworkers, I said, listen, especially particularly if you're looking at like an electric company, I said they provide a service. They're also a business. And I said, that inherently doesn't make them bad people, but you have to keep that in mind with they have to provide the service.
Yeah. Well, and people look at utilities as a public service, right? They don't look at it as a business. And we can spend an hour talking. Well, we could probably spend several hours talking about
Yes.
George's utilities and the Public Service Commission, but that may be a whole separate 3-hour podcast.
Yes.
And so your job immediately before this one, tell me about that one.
I was at E&E News, which is now owned by Politico and also now owned by Axel Springer. But let's take the E&E News part. I was at Energy Wire. There was a series of publications that fall under this umbrella. And there are a group of us, some based in DC and some based kind of scattered across the country. And broadly, we were writing about how the energy sector is transforming, and in two main ways: away from the big, coal and gas power plants and looking at renewables, and also, again, looking from getting electricity from one major source to getting it from smaller groups of solar, battery storage, things like that, and all of what is driving that: the money, the politics, the business strategy, how it's happening. So they hired me specifically because they wanted someone to cover the Southeast. I had a counterpart in the Midwest, and there are a couple in Texas. So being based in Atlanta, I basically focused on TVA, Southern Company, Duke, NextEra, a little bit of Entergy. So we did a lot of work about, what are they doing to make the grid more resilient against extreme weather? Again, taking a look at their electricity mix going forward and things like that.
All right, so forward on, as they say, to today, and now you're Floodlight, and you've been there for just a couple of weeks.
It started December 1st. It was the day before my birthday, and then we had our annual staff gathering the next week in New Orleans. And yes, we were in New Orleans, and yes, we worked very hard. Anyway. Besides morning runs, kind of around the city, and us, doing some dinners at night, it was not party time. We were talking and working.
I was at a convention years ago at a beautiful hotel in San Diego, right on the ocean, and I was in meetings all day for 3 days, and I finally it's like, okay, I got to walk out to the beach and take my shoes off and get some sand,
right?
Because it just seems offensive or insulting or something to go to this beautiful hotel on the beach in San Diego and not actually walk on the beach.
Yes.
But that's the dark side of business travel, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So tell me, what is Floodlight, and I want to kind of mention a couple of times the website, and so people know how to find it too.
Sure. So the website is floodlightnews.org. In short, take what I did at E&E and Energy Wire and ramp it up. And now you're going to say, well, for everyone listening who doesn't know that. But in short, we're a group of editors and reporters, and we do investigative work. So it's no dailies, it's no quick turnarounds. It's we're doing investigative work. So the model works in that we partner with local and national outlets. So national, that could be NPR, that could be The Guardian, that could be still unnamed. Local, and it's weird, I don't always think of these outlets as local, but they in the past, stories have been done in conjunction with newspapers all across Florida, some in Alabama, some out of Louisiana and New Orleans. We work with others that have the same nonprofit model that we have, in part because they may have more time, like that news outlet may only have 2 or 3 people, but they may only publish once a month, and they have more time to devote to something.
So it sounds a little bit like ProPublica in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But more specifically focused on topics, right?
Right. We are. Everything has a climate angle, and or an energy angle. So we are taking a look at the entities that might be doing things behind the scenes to shift and mold Climate policies. So I'm going to say that very broadly. So again, we're doing a lot of looking, for example, like at the lobbying behind the lobbying. Like we all know that there are lobbyists out there. There's money that's recorded and things like that. But we might be looking at some other third-party actors that are working with them and doing things to shape policies to either keep them the way that they are. I mean, this industry in transition is hard. It's, the journalism industry transition is very hard for us. So you look at the fossil fuels industry having to go from these large power plants that relied on coal and gas and then to shifting to solar. That also hits their business model.
Yeah.
And them in their profits. So they're doing everything they can to keep those or to grow them, which is what a business is going to do.
Well, it's fascinating kind of looking at like electric cars for one thing, or electric vehicles, kind of the whole concept of all, it's not just buying an electric car and go drive it. It's all of the infrastructure and charging stations and batteries and all the things that go into that. And someone had made the comparison to like in the 1800s when the U.S. built like 35,000 miles of railroads, how it took the country years to restructure itself to moving people, cargo, shipping on railways versus, horse and buggy and whatever, however else they were moving things. So, yeah.
And that's a perfect example. I mean, we, to my knowledge, are not looking into that specific topic right now. However, it definitely came up during discussion because if anything, I put my hand up and said, we need to watch state legislatures. I mean, in Georgia, we know they had a huge study committee last year, and they just put out a report that's 500 pages. So to your point, right, it's not just buying the cars and driving them. It's getting to different policies, whereas Georgia is one state where, you cannot buy a car from what we would call a startup, a startup maker, with the exception of Tesla. But then you're also getting into the infrastructure. Who builds it? Who owns it? Who pays for it? Where does it go? Who's gonna foot the bill to put them out in the rural areas where you've only got one or two people and one or two chargers? That's a lot of money. However, do you leave them out? Well, then we're going to be in the same situation that we are like with rural broadband, where it was shocking to me, shows how out of touch I was, that there's still so much of the country, and particularly in the Southeast, that doesn't have that kind of connectivity. Do we really want to go that route? So we'll see those trends play out.
So is your focus national? Is it Southeast? A little bit of both in terms of what you're going to write?
It is a little bit of both. And I hate to not give you a straight answer because that's not fair. And when
you haven't been there too long, so right?
Right. Yeah, well, that's true too. But yes, mine is mostly Southeast. I was brought in to help do and expand some coverage in the Southeast.
Okay. All right. And if folks have a resource or an organization or somebody who they think might be able to offer some insight or expertise on this, email kind of the best way to make an introduction that way to you?
Yes, email is the best. So it's Kristi, and that's Kristi at floodlightnews.org.
Okay.
And I'm trying to do, of course, call me in a month and ask me how that's going, but I'm trying to do a really good job of organizing my email into ways where if someone reaches out to me that I'm getting back to them right away or within the next 24 hours or whatever. I'm trying to not get lost in a sea of email this time around.
Good luck.
Yeah, I was going to say, call me in a month and ask me how that's going.
It's great when you start a new job. You can just start with a fresh new email. And
yes.
Every couple of years, I try to get to like a zero inbox, and I never quite get there. Move stuff to folders and
yes, right. Well, it's that fear of if it's in a folder, then you don't see it. The folder is where emails go to die. And so although I'm trying to get better at getting out of that mindset and being like, no, if you're looking for something that has to do with, dogs, it's in the folder marked dogs.
Right. Okay. So I gave you a heads up that I was going to ask this challenging question earlier. So what's the coolest thing about Kristi that people might not know?
Oh, man. I used to never share this, but I grew up dancing ballet. I know a lot of people know me as a runner, which I started to burn off stress because, as you remember, when we met at the AJC, they, like most outlets in the industry, were going through round of buyouts, and that was stressful.
Right.
And I needed a better way to handle that, and that morphed into a whole other huge part of my life. But I grew up dancing ballet. That was a huge part of my life. I loved performing, which is probably one of the reasons why I like racing, and also probably like why I like deadlines, or tend to thrive on deadlines. I stopped doing that when I was in high school, and switched gears and did a lot of community service. So that's something that I rarely talk about. So yeah.
So since you mentioned it, is there a kind of a community organization or something that you want to give some love to? Anybody you work with that you really like?
Oh,
It's okay. I didn't give you that question ahead of time. So
no, and that's a good question. I mean, keeping the journalist hat on, it's like I have to be mindful of that. What I did really appreciate was at E&E, they and forgive me, I know you want to wrap this up, but I do.
No, we got time.
It was after George Floyd, and two runners that I knew were doing a run for justice. And because of Atlanta's very diverse running community, it has a very strong community also of Black runners, many of whom I'm humbled and honored to call friends.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they know I'm a journalist, but I'm like, at some point, I can't just keep talking it. I've got to walk it. And I remember calling, and I'm like, I really want to at least show up and go to this thing. And what I appreciated was, my editors at the time saying, we're getting ready to send out some guidelines. Civil rights should not be a political issue. Go run with your friends. Go do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that was just something that I felt very freeing with that. So
yeah. There's so many large and particularly smaller nonprofits in Metro Atlanta, and a lot of them don't have the bandwidth or the resources to market themselves or get the word out. So I'd like to offer folks the opportunity, if there's something that's near and dear to your heart, then say, hey, this is, I love work. I work with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta. Anybody ever asked me, I said, that's my volunteer thing. So I always like to throw out some love that way. Okay.
Sure.
All right.
I mean, I will say, and I do this to honor my father now. I learned after he passed that he gave a lot of money and a lot of time to the food bank. So I will at least donate food and money to the food bank here and in Maryland. And of course, yes, there's giving with time and there's giving with money. Right now, it's just easier for me to do it with money.
Yeah.
But,
well, I always tell people, you give how you can, and sometimes it's money, sometimes it's doing, coming out and digging, putting a tree in the ground, and sometimes it's giving of your services and abilities, the talents that you have, whether you're a videographer or a writer or a media trader or whatever, all of those things are valuable to nonprofits. And I always encourage folks to say, don't make it too hard. Just
there's always some way to do it, and there's ones that even do direct, we're giving out supplies to help people who are unhoused. So here's the Amazon link to go do. So, I was telling my mom the other day, I'm like, these people aren't like hoarding pencils, like I know that my money is going to, bathroom supplies. Like who the heck would want to like scam me off of that, like that.
Right.
Like I know it's going to where it's supposed to go.
All right. So lightning round. So short answers to these questions. Last book you've read or the last podcast that you listened to?
The last book I read was Running While Black by Allison Desir.
Okay. Favorite local restaurant?
I would say either Gaja or Jen Chan's.
Favorite guilty pleasure?
I did this last night while I was just doing some meal prep and stuff. I had on RuPaul's Drag Race in the background because I could occasionally look up and be like, "What is the weirdness?"
All right. Favorite local getaway?
That one's hard because I'm such a beach person, and I mean like an actual like there's the ocean, not a lake, not to
yeah.
lake. But I do love taking advantage of the parks that we have here. Westside Park, Piedmont Park. I mean, I live in town, so that's not too much of a getaway, but there's places, you can go to just like hide out, chill out.
Yeah.
Put some music on and walk around, things like that.
All right. And I think I know the answer to this one, but favorite non-work hobby?
Running, definitely.
Okay, very good. Okay, now you were saying earlier how your space defines your personality. Kind of looking around you there, pick out one thing and say something that's kind of interesting in how it defines your personality behind you there.
Well,
I see a lot of color.
Yes, and I was going to say that so I did redo my office. I mean, with E&E, I also worked remotely. So during the pandemic, I'm definitely not saying the lockdown was easy. However, I had been working from home for a while. The past couple of years were really hard for me. I mean, they were hard for a lot of people, but I lost my dad unexpectedly, and he was my rock. I got COVID early last year and basically have long COVID. And so, yes, I've been able to run. And I have a long run tomorrow, but that's hard. That's really hard when you can't do what you want to do. Yeah. And you don't really know why. And you also know the medical community is still trying to figure out why. So things were kind of dark, like literally. And when I got this job, I had some time in between, and I remember looking, and I after a while had not been sitting in my office, and I looked around and I'm like, well, it's kind of drab. So I did a remake, and I told myself, I'm like, don't go to Target and like go crazy and buy a bunch of stuff that you have no idea what's going on. So I'm like, what can we redo? And yeah, the big thing was putting in these curtains to make it really bright. The Christmas bulbs hanging up, they were actually in my living room. That was when I had decorated for Christmas a while back and had left them there. And finally I'm like, I want the living room to look more like an adult lives here. So I moved those in here.
Adultism is overrated, I think. Right?
Yes. Well, I agree.
To some extent.
There's a reason why I didn't move all this into the living room and do it with the background of my bookcase, so you can see all my journalism books and women's study books and financial books. It's like that's me, but this is me. So so lots of color. I still have my CDs. I don't play them, but they make me happy. And those are my dad's, most of my dad's cycling jerseys. So I wanted to keep those. That's
cool. We have been talking with Kristi Swartz with Floodlight, a new media outlet. Kristi, give us the URL for Floodlight News one more time.
Yes, floodlightnews.org.
See, that's easy to remember. Not hard. All right.
Yeah. If you Google Floodlight, a light will come up because I've done that. So
good. Okay. Cool. Thank you, Kristi, for taking some time. And as always, look for our 4 Questions Journalist Spotlights, I think every other week. Probably usually on Sundays is when I get them done, unless I'm camping. And I will be back in a couple of weeks. And as always, if you're looking for our database of Atlanta media, go to leftsatlantamedia.com. And if you're a journalist looking for a source, go to mitchesmediamatch.com or just give me a call. And make sure if you're watching this on YouTube that you click that subscribe button. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kristi.
Thanks, Mitch.